Spell that again now. A little bit on the end. Think of potato. How's it? You're right phonetically, but what else? There you go. All right.
That video you just watched was then Vice President Dan Quayle who tell a kid that the word potato was wrong, but it was actually right. Before we start this video, I just want to say I'm not trying to criticize him, and I don't want you guys to go out and hate on anyone after this. Again, I'm not trying to criticize him because of his lack of intelligence, but this is just for US history and stuff. Hope you like this video. There are many dumb politicians in history like Donald Trump, James Buchanan, and others. But one that came up to mind was James Danforth Quayle. James Danforth Quayle, Dan Quayle as we will call him for now, was born in the state of Indiana in 1947, and Dan Quayle's parents were not super rich, but they were pretty comfortable. His father was a newspaper publisher and a businessman. His father was busy doing a lot of stuff. I think his mom was a stay-at-home mom, I believe, I'm not sure. So yeah, they lived in a nice neighborhood, so they obviously have enough money. Anyways, he graduated high school, and when he graduated from college, he got a bachelor's degree in political science from DePaul University. After that, he joined the Indiana National Guard to help protect his state. While he was in the Guard, he managed to get a doctorate, which is a really important degree. Even though he got the degree, he didn't have good grades to attend for the class he took. At the same time, there was a big event called the Vietnam War happening. You know that, don't you? There was something called the draft, which meant that he could be sent to fight in the war. And after all of that, Dan worked for 2 years as a publisher for his family's newspaper. So he did a lot of things in his life.
I spent the war in Indiana.
In 1981, he decided to get into politics, becoming a U.S. representative from Indiana's 4th Congressional District, and later became a state senator for 8 years. In 1988, Vice President George H.W. Bush was running for president against Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis. Bush surprisingly picked Dan Quayle to be his running mate, but few people in the media were criticizing him because of his inexperience and sometimes stumble over his words. This is him talking about the Holocaust in World War II.
Millions of innocent people lost their lives because of the bigotry and Hitlerism. It was an obscene period in our nation's history. No, not our nation's, but in World War II. I mean, we all lived in this century. I didn't live in this century. But
yeah, that didn't go well. When he was in the vice presidential debate, he was comparing himself to JFK right next to Lloyd Benton, Dukakis' running mate, who worked with JFK in the Senate.
I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
that was really uncalled for, Senator.
And after election day, the votes has been counted and it was clear. Bush dominated the race, becoming the 41st president of the United States. And what I mean dominate is that he almost won every single state except for these two, Hawaii, and others in the East Coast. And also not to mention that his campaign promise is to never ever raise taxes. Remember that. Dan Quayle became the 44th vice president of the United States. It's 1992 and Dan Quayle is already vice president. During his vice presidency, he says some stupid, unintelligent quotes like,
What a waste it is to lose one's mind or not to have a mind is being very wasteful. How true that is.
Public speaking is very easy. Welcome to President Bush, Mrs. Bush, and my fellow astronauts. I stand by all the misstatements that I made. I have made good judgments in the past, and I think I made good judgments in the future. The year is still 1992, and Dan Quayle was at an elementary school in New Jersey, and the class was doing a spelling bee. Quayle picked a kid to show him off how to spell the word potato. But Quayle was goofing off and saying that the word was wrong, but it was actually right. Instead, he spelled the word potato, he actually added an E in the end of the word. And that's probably why he lost the 1992 US presidential election with George H.W. Bush. Remember I told you guys that Bush's campaign promises to never ever raise taxes? He did the opposite. He raised taxes. That's because the government went into a recession. But since the government wasn't doing so well, he had to raise them to keep the economy strong. But he tried to help the economy by raising taxes, like I said, but it didn't help. Alright, anyways, I believe there's a really important lesson that we can learn from Dan Quayle being vice president, and it's that when you have a really big important job, try not to act dumb. Seriously!
I spent the war in Indiana. Getting shot was not for me. I never went to Nam. I never saw Saigon. I only watched it on TV.
He's a very different man from the intellectual midget that has been portrayed in much of the media.